Donald Trump's election is certified as he begins to seek significant changes to U.S. borders. Negotiations continued in the effort to secure the release of Israel's hostages taken by Hamas, as Israel seeks greater independence in the manufacturing of munitions. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resigns in Canada, as British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is embroiled in major scandal. Will 2025 see the collapse of the left? Welcome to Inside Israel News, your home for American conservative commentary on international affairs and thorough and unbiased analysis of Israeli news, politics, and current events in the Middle East. Or as the internet trolls say, mouthpiece of the Zionist conspiracy, spokesman for the elders of Zion, highly paid propagandist of the Mossad. Yeah, no. This is Inside Israel News. I'm your host, Isaac Kite. Welcome back, Insiders, and Happy New Year! Hopefully 2025 will be a good year for us all. I hope 2024 was decent. Obviously, we had some very good news in 2024, and a lot of things changed for the better, which I discussed in the last episode, the 2024 Year in Review. So, now I am back for another year as your gregarious Vulcan, your prophet of things to come, your shadow president, your mad genius, and a whole host of other things. So, I'm back with a vengeance, my Rush Limbaugh style, trying to bring a little bit of cheer, comedy, and fascinating analysis of things. Excellent analysis here. I hate to sound impressed with myself, but reviewing 2024 and considering all of the things that took place and my analysis and everything, it seems that this show is really excellent. I'm getting some good feedback. But also, as I've talked about, you get analysis here of the quality of the likes of Peter Zion or Neil Ferguson or the Goodfellows podcast on, from the Hoover Institute. Now, obviously, those people bring their own knowledge and their own expertise, but the analysis, at least, of events, news, and what have you is at least as good. And from what I'm hearing from a lot of people, the feedback that I've gotten over the year, fairly intellectual. I like to call myself the working class intellectual, so maybe I'll add that, right? In addition to being your gregarious Vulcan, I'm also your mad genius and your working class intellectual. So that is really... I don't want to say it's gratifying. I put a lot of work into this and a lot of thought, and I'm glad to see that it's good stuff. I really want you guys to be able to get the best information, and I understand it's a data download. I heard people say it's a brain download, Isaac. Yes, I get it, but I want to make sure you guys get the best information. Interesting question for feedback if you are on it. I've heard from a couple of people that they like the shows better when I dance from topic to topic relatively quickly rather than going too in-depth on certain things. I mean, there are some things I need to be in-depth on. Just curious what you guys think. Should I be a little more, nimble and jump over each subject candlestick as we go, like Jack, or should I, dive into certain things? I don't know. There are areas, like I did in the last episode with national security, where I do take the moment to deep dive into the idea of the crazy horse drones, for example, just because it illustrates the situation that we're in and how we need to start thinking outside the box. Get some young officers together and enlisted personnel, especially your non-coms, for different projects, and let them think. Let them do what they do. I mean, those are the people that you have the young officers whose job it is to execute the orders of those who are higher up. You have the non-coms who make these things happen. They make everything happen. Your sergeants, your chiefs, and petty officers. Let's hear what they have to say and come up with some new ideas, because there's a certain stagnant attitude there. Anyway, point is, trying to think outside the box a little bit. And so I thought that was something to go kind of in depth on a little bit. But we'll see. Hey, what do you think? reach out on Facebook, the Inside Israel News page. Find the America Israel Insider News account on X, where I do a lot of stuff there. Speaking of that, little funny story, kind of sad to me, a little embarrassing. I ran into someone and, so there's this story that Gal Gadot was going to the Golden Globes and they wouldn't let her wear a pin, the little yellow ribbon pin for the hostages because it's too political. And so I'm sitting there like, the Golden Globes is run by neo-Nazis apparently. So I had Grok, thank you Grok, my favorite AI, create an image for me of a Golden Globe with a swastika on it and blood coming out the bottom. And I shared this rather graphic image and said, the Golden Globes has become this Nazi thing. And a fellow pro-Israel account shared on that thinking that I was attacking Gal Gadot. They didn't understand what I was trying to get at, and I guess I could have been clearer. And so I called them a groiper, and they're like, no, wait, I'm not a groiper. And so after a little bit, I realized, I'd been sharing a bunch of stuff about the hostages, calling for their release, and I'd been kind of emotional about that. And so I was posting with my heart and not with my head. And we had a little laugh about it. I made my apologies and we moved on. But it's one of these things that can happen. Sometimes you misread something, sometimes you mishear something, and for some of us, these are such intense times emotionally. So I was not being a very good gregarious Vulcan. No Kathia there, no logic. I was very emotional, but it was good once we connected and started talking. He just assumed that I was referring to the allegations of war crimes against Gal Gadot, which are ridiculous. We both agree. But anyway, it happens. It does happen. But good times. So. Yeah, find me on social media, send me feedback, message me, comment, tag me on something, and say, love the show, love when you do this, love when you do that, hate when you do this, give it up, go home, don't make another episode. Whatever you feel like saying, just saw it right off. You're welcome to put it in there. But in any event, there. And I am going to continue in my ongoing mission, to boldly go where no podcaster has gone before. No, I do want to be a little more entertaining. So I'm working on that. So any feedback on how I can be more entertaining or what you like about the show, what you don't like, we love it when you dancing across the topics quickly, hate it when you get stuck on a topic for too long. Okay, I can take it. I'm a man. I can handle it. All right. But I am, like I said, I'm pleased that I'm giving good analysis and that the show seems to be going well. Appreciate the attention you guys give. Love every one of you. Peace, love, and all that good stuff. Listeners from around the world, plenty in Europe and the Arab world. Assalamu alaikum to you. Welcome. And it's been a harrowing year. It's been quite a bit. But you have been on the cutting edge of societal evolution. You have been on a mission to learn absolutely everything and know everything before it happens. And I just want to go back just for a minute to that quote I had from Walter Lippmann a few episodes back, where I read about him writing about that story about the island in World War I where Germans and English and French were living and didn't know that the war had happened or had started until a ship arrived. Once every month they get a ship in. There's this reality that the world changes and we don't always perceive those changes. But if you're listening to this show, you will know what's happening before it happens, because that's how I get down. And I make sure that you know, right? So I was talking about World War III by proxy. I was talking about the Axis forces long before this stuff. And now we've got North Korean troops fighting Ukraine and Russia. We've got Houthis fighting Ukraine and Russia. China is giving all kinds of technology and military support somewhat quietly to the Russians. And, it's pretty obvious they're all working together. So there you go. I knew ahead of time. Once again, Happy New Year's. Hope this is going to be a good year for everyone. Hope your New Year's resolutions haven't ended already. My resolution is I want to get you, slightly shorter episodes, but continue the great analysis. And of course, post more often. That's always my goal. But I work very hard, and it's difficult sometimes to come up with the time. All right. Well, I rang in the new year by watching the Deadpool Wolverine movie, which I had not had a chance to see. A little bit of silly wokeness in it, but it was amusing and entertaining to a certain degree. And I really love the villain. It takes a good villain for to make that kind of swashbuckling action film, and I think they handled that well. So you can make entertainment, Hollywood. It is possible. You can make things that people like. Just tone down the woke moralizing. We're tired of this puritanical wokeness. Anyway, but good hookah, good company. Counted down to the new year and rang it in style, just like I said I would. So that's how I brought in 2025. So speaking of entertainment, I've been continuing reading in Animal Lab and Good Intentions by Bob Zeidman. There's also the Good Intentions newsletter. You can go look up, sign up for that to get more information from Bob. Bob Zeidman's a longtime pro-Israel and conservative commentator. He's written a number of books. And like I've said, kind of in the vein of Ayn Rand, you get these stories that are, for once you have values that you share, right? They're about freedom, about economic opportunity, about, fighting wokeness. So, from a guy who, is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, Bob has been behind the lines, let's just say, fighting the good fight. So he knows how valuable it is to hear that message when you're reading entertainment and not hear wokeness and instead hear, hey, here's a story about, why capitalism is good on the whole. Great. So Good Intentions, Animal Lab by Bob Zeidman, the Good Intentions newsletter. Get hooked up. Get connected now. There's a series coming up. Really enjoying Angel Studios. I mean, they had, the great movies about child trafficking, fighting child trafficking, and then the Reagan movie, and now Homestead, and Neil McDonough. I'm a big fan, have been ever since I saw him in Star Trek First Contact almost 30 years ago. I'm not that old, really. The show is really well made, and like with Good Intentions and that kind of stuff that I like to read, it's really heartwarming to see entertainment that values faith and humanity and isn't just about how horrible humanity can be. And I guess human beings can be bad, but also celebrates how we can come together as people in a cause of morality and justice, and work together for the common good, real good, not tyranny and all that kind of garbage. So really good movie. I enjoyed it very much. My kids enjoyed it. Just enough action to make it entertaining, but not too much. I don't know what the series is like yet. I haven't gotten a chance to watch it, but I will get on that ASAP. It seems like it's going to be a good film. But one of the things I kind of picked out in it, I love the interaction as you watch it between the main character, Neil McDonough's character, and the character's wife. They have a really good relationship, and while they disagree with each other about a number of things, she really carries the faith between the two of them. He's a little more skeptical, and it's just, I really love the relationship. Really good stuff. We have such poor acting today out there in the Hollywood woke sphere that seeing people actually act and they have a chemistry between them like a real couple, right? Like two real people that are going through this. I mean, it's amazing that you can act. I mean, you can actually, do what what the story requires. Bring that character to life. We haven't seen that kind of acting for some time, and it's been sorely missing. So glad to see it back. Now, let me take you to the opposite extreme now, real quick. I also finally got a chance to watch the new Beetlejuice movie. Was a big fan of the old one as a kid. Loved it. The whole like brooding goth teenager and talking to dead people and whatever. It was silly. movie in its time. And Winona Ryder, and for those who enjoyed her acting in the day, such as it was, it doesn't require that much skill to play that character, I suppose, at the time. Anyway, so this new story kind of brings it up to now and what those characters are doing, and I don't know. It was interesting. Could have been better. I do like that. So, a little bit of a spoiler alert. I'm going to talk a little bit about the plot, but I'm not going to give too much away. But the daughter, so now, Ryder's character has a daughter. The daughter is kind of nuts. Like she's angry at her mom, and this kind of thing. And they have a lot of wokeness because, of course, the kind of people who made the original and this new movie are kind of in that general vein. But the daughter's being all about climate change and fighting, the injustices and being a social justice warrior. They intend that to show that she's this honorable, crusader for wokeness. But it just makes the character seem all that more dysfunctional. I mean, I think it really, in essence, it's the only good wokeness I've seen. It contributes to the fact that this character is delusional, off chasing fantasies, and distant and detached from her family. So it did actually contribute to the story. So it's just kind of a funny thing. And of course, Monica Bellucci is in it, one of my favorite actresses of all time. I know what it is about Italy. You get Sophia Loren, Monica Bellucci, great and very attractive actresses over the years. So Italy, very good. So that was a bit of fun. And there you are. I mean, that's that. But if you talk about the tale of two movies, Homestead versus Beetlejuice, like Homestead is a really human story that you can relate to the characters, great chemistry, excellent acting. It's about faith and community and how people handle stress and difficult situations and people making moral and ethical judgments in, trying circumstances, right, where people are stressed and strained and this kind of thing, what that looks like. Because we deal with all that in our everyday lives. God, I hope not so intensely. Then you turn over and you've got some, silly movie about, dead people or whatever, and it's, woke and whatever. But anyway, there you go. That's the juxtaposition, I suppose. All right. So now let's get serious. Let's get into the news. Oi. That's all I have to say. Oi Gewalt. So we had terror attacks on New Year's Eve. And, ramming attack, a terrorist drove into a crowd in New Orleans. The bomb go off in Las Vegas outside of the Trump Hotel in a Cybertruck, which the Cybertruck, came out pretty well. Basically, it just killed the terrorist and didn't do much damage to anything else. That tells you how well those vehicles are built. I have to commend Elon Musk for that. Just wow. Impressive structure there. But then we get the media... car explodes outside of, the Trump Hotel, car ramming attack. Can you believe it, my friends? A car, through no human instigation, drove into a crowd of people. It's ridiculous. We're having these problems all the time with these cars just driving into people and blowing up in front of hotels and what have you. It's insane. I mean, you'd almost think there was a person in there who was acting out of some kind of personal malice for some kind of agenda. This is back to the thing that guns kill people, right? It's amazing how the media had all these damned headlines about, car rammed people and, come on, people. This was terrorism. It was obvious terrorism. We knew right away. And the fact that they weren't illegals, the media's like, oh, Trump said they were illegals. Who cares? People died. It's a tragedy. We have terrorism in our country. And it's because of the weakness of our leadership. Thankfully, not for much longer. But, these headlines, just ridiculous. But anyway, my friend Kenny White posted an article. We have it up on politicalvanguard.com in the contributors section. Kenny wrote a great article about how stupid it was that they do this word soup with headlines and what have you, when we all know what's happening, right? We are not stupid, right? But they're, we don't want to create bigotry. You have to call a spade a spade. When it's terrorism, it's terrorism. President Biden couldn't even bring himself to use the word. As usual, our leaders can't, can't even be honest with us, and it's beyond ridiculous. So If cars are ramming people, by the way, maybe we should ban cars. I mean, we if guns kill people and we want to ban guns, then let's ban cars too, because apparently they're driving into people. Just wow. Let's have a good laugh together. And it's just, we get this all the time with Israel about, every time, something happens. IDF soldiers killed 10 Palestinians after terrorist attack, or after attack on a synagogue or something. You know what I mean? Always they lead with when Israel, they lead with IDF soldiers did this, and it was in response to some kind of an attack or something. Not important. Whereas car ramming attack in Jerusalem. Some car just drove into people, right? Who was driving the car? What was going on? Oh, we don't want to talk about that. You see, that's the frustration. This is why, as Elon Musk says, you are the media now on X. We can share information and news and know what's really going on and not have to put up with the media anymore. I've been looking forward to this day for many years when leaders could just bypass the media, the traditional media. Who cares what Fox News has? Who cares what CNN and LSD and all these stupid channels, ABC, CBS. I see lots of BS on CBS. Who cares what they say? They're just talking heads, right? You get better analysis here, my friends, on Inside Israel News than you're ever going to get from CBS, right? Okay, they can pay to have, big talking heads come in, but my talking head that never shuts up can give you plenty of information without you having to go through all that garbage. And you know that I'm telling you what is, I believe to be honest and the truth, and giving you, forward-looking information. But these people, they go on there and they try to lie to us and they spin information. They're done. Their time has passed. All right. So, we had terrorism in the United States on a day when people just wanted to have fun. And it's unacceptable. It's got to stop. And we need to get back on top of our security situation. Get our police need to be able to go out and enforce the law. We need to be able to find these people. And it's like, all these people are on watch lists and the FBI is supposedly watching them, and then they go blow things up or ram people. And it's like, we knew. Anyway. All right. How about some good news? January 6th has come and gone. No riots, no problems. The left accepted it. Kamala Harris had the fun honor of going up and certifying her defeat, which she handled with aplomb. Ted Cruz on the Verdict podcast talking about that, how he appreciated her courage and demeanor, going up and being willing to do that. She could certainly have done something far less classy. The left is ready for their hissy fits and tantrums. So at least that was handled properly, without objection and what have you. And there's that. So the election's certified. Donald Trump will take the oath of office. The only last little thing is the lawfare. We have the New York court wants to do the sentencing hearing on the money, the hush money case and this kind of thing. And it's like, come on, people, it's the dumbest thing ever. 37 felonies for nothing, right? For paying hush money. I mean, nothing that any politician hasn't done. Hell, Congress had a fund. They set your tax dollars aside to pay people to be quiet because members of Congress were horsing around, right? I mean, the Me Too movement caught a bunch of these people, most of them Democrats, right? And there was money, your tax dollars and mine, going to hush people, right? That's not a crime, though, because, of course, Congress writes the laws. So, when I do it, it's not a crime. But when you do it, nothing I can do for you. You've got to go to prison or pay fines or do whatever. Anyway, 2-tier justice, 3-tier justice, something like that. It's ridiculous. And that also has to stop. In any case, they want to have this sentencing hearing. And we all know it's lawfare. We all know it's nonsense. The charges should have been dropped. They should never have been brought. The whole case is baloney, but they're trying to use it for whatever they can. So, anyway, overvaluing your real estate. They actually went after Donald Trump for overvaluing his real estate. If it hadn't happened, I couldn't have made it up. Okay. Trump's cabinet picks, they're gaining popularity. Pete Hegseth now has the votes to be confirmed, so we've heard, as does most of the cabinet. Haven't heard too much about Tulsi Gabbard, but we'll see. We're getting support for a number of bills. Already the House has passed the Lake and Riley Act to deport illegal aliens who commit horrible crimes on our soil. And of course, over 100 Democrats voted against it. I don't know how you can vote against that. You know, people who come here illegally and murder and rape and torture our citizens, you know, in various cases, not necessarily in the case of Lake and Riley in particular, but I'm just saying, you know, they come here and commit these crimes. Those people should be the first to go, right? Donald Trump has indicated a willingness to talk about and negotiate about the quote-unquote dreamers, people who are illegal but have lived here most of their lives. That's one thing. If they haven't committed crimes, that's something to negotiate over. But, you know, these criminals need to be deported first, and generally we need to be deporting people. You just can't come here and squat in the United States. Not how it works. That's what borders are for. Beside which, Mexico needs the labor. You know, I'm going to talk about later. They should go to northern Mexico and work. That's where it's needed, right? That's where they need to be. All right. Just a quick note here. This I love. Byron McDonald and Ted Cruz have introduced a tax bill to eliminate taxes on tips. It was promised in the campaign. The legislation's been written. I'm just so proud to see it because, you know, people who work for tips are generally not well paid. It's very difficult work and stressful work dealing with people, especially with the Karens and the Neils out there who want to complain all the time. You know, the least we could do is just not tax their tips. That's going to have a huge impact on the economy. It's going to cause a lot of growth. And more importantly, it's going to ease the strain on the hardest working, lowest income Americans. So by all means, let's get that passed. But that and a number of other bills, we're starting to get Democrat senators like Fetterman and others saying that they're willing to vote for these bills, and there's a good chance that they're going to pass. Good news. Speaking of introductions, so now they're back on the direct election shtick. Some Democrats have proposed a constitutional amendment to do the national popular vote for the presidency. And I continue to warn them. I mean, looking back at the Keating Amendment, you would have to have a runoff. And it's very clear now. We've seen lots of polls done of those who voted Libertarian or for RFK Jr. in those states where he was on the ballot. Those who voted for Jill Stein, quite surprisingly, a larger number of them would have voted for Trump than I thought. But if there'd been a runoff election and those people had turned out, Trump would have won. So, you know, democracy worked either which way you want to count the votes, as I've already analyzed in past episodes. But they're still on this thing. Again, if you have direct election of the president, you have to have a runoff and you have to have national election laws. I don't think they're going to like the national election laws that are going to be written by a Republican Congress, my friends. I actually believe we should have national election laws and a national standard. And, you know, we're starting to hear some movement in that general direction. Donald Trump saying he wants elections over at 10 o'clock at night, right? We should have everything counted. Like polls close at 8, we should have every election done by 10. I'm with him. Midnight at the latest. I mean, you can't take a month to count the votes. We don't trust that. Right? We know that there's something harebrained and dubious going on here, right? It's just not right. Count the votes, certify the election. There you go. We're done. It can be done quickly. India holds elections where hundreds of millions of people vote. They vote in person on paper ballots. The ballots are counted and the election is done all in the same day. And they have basically certified results. You know, there's a little bit more to it after the fact, but there's that. And they have fair elections. People don't complain that much. You know, occasionally a little complaint here or there, but you know, they're able to do that nationally and people feel the results are fair. We could do it here, right? We have all the technology and the money. I mean, come on. We have Elon Musk, for God's sake. So let's just get it done. But I do think it's funny. They keep getting on that direct election stick. shtick there. And as I talked about in the last episode back in 130, if we'd had the district system or the Keating Amendment direct election, we know how this election would have gone. So anyway, that's, it's just funny to me that they keep, harping on that topic. But whatever, get over it, people. We have an electoral college and it should be maintained. Like I said, I support the district system. Same electoral college, just let the congressional districts choose their own electors, basically. Every congressional election would have its own vote. And then, we'd have a better election. If you want to know more, go back to episode 130. All right. Expansion. I love talking about this. So first, let's talk about Canada. Donald Trump sitting down with Justin Trudeau for dinner, and he says to Prime Minister Trudy, which is what I like to call him, that the U.S. should annex Canada, and he should just become a governor of the 51st state. And it's been this great troll that Trump has been on about how we're going to take Canada. The U.S. has no interest in annexing Canada. We don't need Canada to be annexed to have a good economic relationship with them. But it has drawn out the fact that Trudy is a wimp. And everyone knows it, and he's incompetent. There's no intelligence there. Freeland, his finance minister, she was running the government until she quit, and he didn't want to resign. But Donald Trump kept on it and kept the trolling going. And finally, at long last, Trudeau has resigned. Elections coming up, probably May, and hopefully Pierre Poilievre will win, and that will be a beautiful thing. More on that a little later. There's been a great interview out, Justin Peterson and Pierre Poilievre. Very, very good interview. Highly recommend. Jordan Peterson's a great interviewer, and I was really surprised because you get politicians on the right who talk a good talk about economic opportunity and what have you, but Poilievre was out talking about how he's talking with factory workers and entrepreneurs and skilled laborers and the people who really make the economy happen, who really do the things, right? And listening to them and talking about their dreams, that kind of thing, and how they can't afford a house. And, it's incredible. It's good to see somebody actually connecting with people. In any case, Trump's angle here with Canada, I think, is one, to show the weakness of the current government. And, once Canada has a more competent leader in charge, like Pierre, we will have a different situation. There also should be greater economic integration between the two countries and greater openness to travel and that kind of thing. And that can be achieved without annexation, right? But Canada is a separate country. Like 90% of Canadians do not want to be part of the U.S. Somebody did a poll geographically. Not a single riding in Canada has a plurality that supports joining the U.S. What's a riding, Isaac? So we call our congressional districts, a geographic area that elects a single representative. In Europe, continental Europe, they call them mandates. In Britain, they're called constituencies because it's a constituency, don't you know? And in Canada, they're called ridings. Basically, you could ride it by horse at one time. And so each riding district elects a member of the House of Commons, the Canadian Parliament. So anyway, not one of them supports joining the U.S. The most conservative riding in Canada, so it has 25%, one quarter of its membership who want to join the U.S. Anyway, my friends, we don't want the French Canadians. Okay, they are a nuisance to Canada, and you know what? Canada can have them. We don't want them. It's a jest. It's a joke. It's a little gauche. I get it, but that's a joke. I do know some wonderful French Canadian people, but I have to pick on them. So anyway, we don't want Canada, but the economic integration would be beneficial to both countries. Especially to Canada, because for the most part, it supports our economy. But hearing, Poilievre talk about, look, they have all this gas and oil that they could be drilling for. They could run a pipeline through British Columbia, and they could sell their oil and gas to Asia at premium prices because the Asian markets are desperate for energy. Canada could be a boom country all across with manufacturing, with energy production, and technology. They just have to free up their economy to do it. Go watch the interview. It's a very good interview. Well worth the listen and the time. There have been some people joking about annexing Mexico on X. We're having a great time, field day, just playing around with memes and maps and all that. I just think it's wonderful that Americans are learning geography and learning that these things, there are these other countries. I'm sorry. A lot of Americans are not very good at their geography. And one of the things I found with Europeans and others, the geography ends up being a lot more important to them. And for some reason, it's just not that important here. But then you consider it's like we have America, this giant country that spans a continent. And yeah, there's the Canadians up north, eh? And, there's Mexico del Sur. But for the most part, we're kind of an island out here in North America, and borders and geography really aren't that important. But if you live in, Eastern Poland, you're very much aware of geography because not that far from you is a line on a map that, delineates the Axis powers from NATO. And so that geography is very important to you there. But when it comes to Mexico, people have been joking about annexation. Northern Mexico already belongs to the United States to all intents and purposes. Like it's fully integrated into the U.S. economy thanks to USMCA, formerly NAFTA, Sonora, Baja California, all that area there. All of that works with our economy very much like the Canadians do. It supports our economy, does great manufacturing. So basically we already own that. We don't need to annex it. We don't need all the trouble that goes on down there. As I've said many times before and will repeat again, and Peter Zion is really great on pushing this, if we want greater economic integration with Mexico, they need access to the interior. The central mountain range of Mexico has like 60% of its population, including Mexico City. And that is where the people are. And if the railroads and roads and infrastructure were there to access that area, we could increase the manufacturing and lower inflation and cost of living here. Because as the cost of manufacturing goes up in China and Southeast Asia due to demographic pressures and deglobalization and higher shipping costs because the seas aren't as secure, there's no shipping from Mexico. I mean, you could load things in Veracruz and take it up to New Orleans, right? But, at the same time, you could just put stuff on a train, theoretically, in northern Mexico and ride it right up to the border in Texas, right there, Ciudad Juarez, and right across the border into El Paso, and there you go. And they can go on American railroads anywhere they need to go, okay? So that would be the next thing there. The Gulf of America, this is a funny one. Donald Trump talking about he wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Greg Abbott had a good time, governor of Texas, out there. Well, we should call it the Gulf of Texas because, of course, we should. Every Texan wants to name everything after Texas. Texans dream big. That's fine. Look, America is a name that's out there. It's on a lot of geographic features. 2 continents are named America. There's the United States of America, a country named after America. All of that originally from the Italian cartographer Amerigo, whose name lends to the continents because he created maps. Maps that were Amerigo's maps of what became known as Americo or America, right? Anyway, so I oppose that change. Mexico, the country, Mexico, is named after the Mexica, and the Mexica were the central power in Tenochtitlan of the Triple Alliance, what we call the Aztecs now. Aztecs has become a little bit of a loaded term politically, so people say Triple Alliance. It's all the same thing, but it was led by the Mexica. And, like a lot of things, names from Native American words, like Texas, which originally was a native word there for ally, right? So that's there, but we have lots of Utah named after the Utes. I could go on. Okay. We have lots of great places. And of course I live near Oklahoma. So we have Tahlequah. We have great places in Cherokee and Choctaw. And you get to see some of the languages out there. Fascinating people, the Wasatch, the Osage. Fascinating people to learn about, as I have. But I digress. In any case, let's leave it alone. It's the Gulf of Mexico. It's always been called the Gulf of Mexico since, time immemorial. Let's leave it alone. The only geographic change that I have supported myself in my lifetime, other than the addition of new countries, is the change of Persian Gulf to Arabian Gulf. You'll hear me refer to the Persian Gulf as the Arabian Gulf, because it borders more of Arabia, and with all the nonsense with the way Iran treats the Arabs, there's an Arabian Sea, there can be an Arabian Gulf. That's something of a political thing I have. I side with the Arabs on that one. But anyway, you're free to have your own opinion on that subject. Let's leave it alone. But it is interesting. Donald Trump says something and all of a sudden everybody goes off on whatever. You'll notice I've left one for last. Why have I left Greenland? Why have I left it for last? I've been posting all over X, like, the U.S. should have Greenland. There are 56,000 people that live there. They don't. The Danes control it, Denmark, right? They don't have the money to develop it. They're barely able to protect it. China's trying to get in edgewise. They've been trying to get in there to build airports and develop mining rights and whatever. China wants in, just like they're in at the Panama Canal, right? So, first of all, from a strategic point of view, whatever your enemy wants to have, you don't want them to have. Better that you should have it, right? Okay, so that's the first thing. But I mean, all kinds of economic resources there that the United States has the funds to develop, and the cause. Like, we could use the raw materials that would come out of Greenland. We could use the oil and gas. There's great fishing up there. Right? All of that would benefit our economy, and we would be happy to develop it. Don Jr. flew up there recently, met with lots of people in MAGA hats and celebrating and cheering. So, there's some excitement for it. The native peoples that live up there would have all of the legal protections that are afforded Native Americans in the United States. We have our welfare state, for those who need it, right? And it would be a huge investment for the United States to buy, because we'll get all that money back from developing the resources there. The Earth has been in a natural warming phase since the end of the Ice Age. Still, jury's still out on whether or not human actions or carbon emissions, all this kind of thing, are actually affecting that. And if they are, in 5,000 years, we might actually have a problem. But, then you get scientists, quote unquote, who go out and start engaging in millenarianism and saying, the sky is falling, we're all going to die in 12 years. And, 12 years go by and everything's fine. Anyway, there's something going on with the ocean currents and the way that the heat is distributed on the Earth that is driving warmer air and warmer water northward, because the Antarctic ice caps are advancing every year. It's getting colder down south, but it's getting warmer up north. I'm kind of curious to see what it is. And if it weren't for all the climate change nonsense, we could have some real scientists go out and find out what is going on. Why are the Arctic ice caps retreating when the Antarctic ice caps are expanding? Be fascinating to know. But like a lot of things in science, it's not woke, so you can't investigate it. Anyway, get off my soapbox on that. So the retreating Arctic ice cap means that the Northwest Passage through Canada may be open soon. That goes by Greenland, by the way. The Arctic will be an area that we can increasingly develop. More oil drilling, more both offshore and onshore, more mining, more, we're going to have access to a lot more stuff up there to develop it. But the best thing is the strategic argument, right? I'm frustrated that I have to say this out loud, but I've been watching a bunch of videos from people talking about Greenland and why the U.S. would want it. And the people who make these videos assume that people are stupid. I have to explain everything to them. I don't assume that you guys are stupid. I do try to explain everything, and I have had a few people comment that sometimes they don't know what I'm talking about, but they find me educational anyway. So I try. But it should be fairly obvious, right? If Russia launched its nuclear missiles at the United States, they're going to fly over the Arctic, including over Greenland. A lot of them are going to fly over Greenland. That's why during the Cold War, we had a bunch of radar stations and military bases up there. Cold War ended, we took all that stuff down. There's a bunch of junk sitting around Greenland now from the Cold War that we left behind. But That's a very strategically valuable piece of real estate for us. We need it, right? And it's not the first time this has come up. The United States got the Virgin Islands from Denmark years ago when William Seward bought Alaska in 1867, what they called Seward's Folly. Oh, if they only knew. God, Alaska has been such a net positive for the United States. It's not even funny, right? They also, the year later, in 1868, offered to buy Greenland from Denmark, and it was worth even less then than it is now. So, Denmark didn't take them up on the offer. In 1946, Harry Truman offered $100 million, the cost of a U.S. battleship at the time. A lot of money back in 1946 to buy it from Denmark for our strategic, for the strategic benefit of owning it in the Cold War. And we obviously, Denmark is part of NATO, and we shared it, and anyway. We should have Greenland, my friends. It should be in the U.S. Strategic reasons and for the economic reasons that I've talked about before. But it's kind of curious. So, the King of Denmark just remade his family crest and put a polar bear on it. Obviously, a shout out to Greenland. It's very important to the Danes. But Greenland has been considering independence. And really the only thing between Greenland and independence is the fact that it's just infeasible. There are 56,000 people there. They do some fishing. And while they have all of these valuable resources, they could never protect them. So it can't really be an independent country. In theory, it could be a protectorate of the United States, an independent country under U.S. protection, but they'd have a lot more benefits as a U.S. territory. We would spend the money to develop the infrastructure there, military, economic, and civilian infrastructure, airports, roads, railroads, what have you, because it would be in our best interest to do so, not out of any kind of altruism, right? And the population there would benefit. And if 10 or 20,000 Americans moved in to work on the oil rigs or what have you, that would be a boon to their economy, massively. It would bring so much money to them. So Greenland would benefit hugely in this deal. It'd be huge. But anyway, puts Denmark in a very awkward situation. You see, if Greenland were to declare independence, then the U.S. can ignore Denmark and their claims to the area, right? And we can negotiate directly with Greenland. So for the Danes, it's like if they negotiated with Trump right now, like January 21st, get on the phone, Donald, what I meant, sorry, we've been how about we come up with a deal? And then they could make some money off of it while they still have it to sell, right? Otherwise, they're not going to have it. Anyway, so Trump is really clever with the way he times these things. But we've got people talking about geography. We have people talking about expansion. We have people talking about territories and all this kind of thing. It's wonderful how Trump says something that seems off the wall to a lot of people. And all of a sudden, Americans are talking about foreign policy and the Monroe Doctrine and all of these interesting things. Shout out to William there, my friend William, you know who you are. We were just, it's amazing hearing the media talking about the Monroe Doctrine. We learned about it in school, but when they still taught history, about, America ensuring that there would not be any further colonization in the Americas, in the Western Hemisphere, right? So anyway, Greenland should be in the U.S. And you've heard me talk about missile defenses before, right? We got the 40 ABM anti-ballistic missiles up in Alaska and what have you. If we had more of them in Greenland as well, and some THAAD missiles, and, we could really defend ourselves against nuclear attack, and thus, blustering dictators would be less of a threat. Okay. Anyway, last thought here. It's so sad to see the fires in California. I don't want to talk about this a lot. I don't want to go too in depth. What frustrates me most, because I grew up in California, it used to be a lovely place to live. And it's got some beautiful land, but they don't maintain it. Their environmental laws have been, hands off and empty the reservoirs and, all this stuff about the Delta smelt, which isn't even native to the Delta, and, how that's going to hurt the salmon populations and all this kind of thing. And it's like, we're shutting down farming, we're destroying economic value, we're destroying people's lives, and now we are destroying whole cities and whole neighborhoods over this stuff. I mean, Incompetence is when a person is stupid and incapable, right? Now, there are people out there, lovely people, who aren't very bright. Okay, I'm a father, I have children, young children, very silly. It can be funny, okay? That's one thing. I can forgive the man or woman who just doesn't know a lot of stuff and acts out of ignorance. I don't mean ignorance insultingly, but who just does not know. I can forgive that. But malfeasance, people who should know better and don't, who choose to delude themselves, I can't tolerate. And that's California. For years we've been talking about, you have all this dry brush all over California. If you look at the tree rings, California just had the wettest century in 1,200 years. California's a desert. It's dry. You have to store water. You have to clear brush. The natives burned all the time. Learning from native tribes, I got to learn quite a bit from the Tuolamis and the Shoshones and different native tribes that still exist, the nations that still exist in California. And they, have in their legends, they burned all the time. In addition to the natural forest fires caused by lightning and such, they burned, right? And that was very important, part of their culture. So you have to clear the brush away. Otherwise, it gets dangerous, right? Well, logging companies, wood is so valuable now, they'll do whatever it takes to get at it. So if you let them take every third tree, if you let them go into these forests and take every third tree, they would be happy to clear out the brush. And that's good for the trees because now there's less brush competing with them. And the trees, if forests get too dense, then new trees can't take root. You also get homogenization of tree species. I grew up in a forest, can you tell? If you have a forest that's all Douglas firs and a genetically narrow group of Douglas firs, then they're vulnerable to certain kinds of beetles and blights. Right? If you also have some redwoods mixed in, if you also have cedars and various other kinds of pines and what have you, you have a mix of trees that can take root. And then, they have different characteristics when it comes to fire. Redwoods and sequoia trees are less vulnerable to fire. Anyway, I digress. The point is, let them clear the forests a little bit. Thin them, clear the brush, and you'd have less of this stuff. Then there's the reservoirs. I don't know what idiot dreamed this up. This is so frustrating when I lived there. I hope you can hear my frustration, friends. We got to drain the reservoirs for the fish. So tell me you don't know how reservoirs work without telling me you don't know how reservoirs work. Reservoirs keep water in rivers, right? In California, again, if you talk to the natives, the rivers dried up every year. There are a few lakes up in the mountains, and there was Tulare. Most of Tulare County used to be a lake. So there were lakes, but the rivers dried up, and the lakes got very low in the summertime. It was dry, funny thing. It's a desert. It happens in deserts. So if you build reservoirs, then they fill up with water, and then you can let that water out slowly so that the river stays wet all year round, and that's good for the fish. It's better for the fish than when it dries up. My friends, you can never have too many reservoirs. You can never have tall enough dams. At the time I was there, we were talking about how there was this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and Congressman Tom McClintock championed this cause for years back then. And it was so sad it didn't happen. But we could have raised dams, that is, R-A-I-S-E, not R-A-Z-E, which is what they want to do to the dams, is destroy them. But we could have raised them up and stored even more water. So that would be drinking water, water for fighting fires, right? And this would have been done all over California. Could have been a beautiful thing. But no, they want to drain the reservoirs. It's just ridiculous. I go back to the great quote from Groucho Marx, right? An opera house is an opera house, a reservoir is a reservoir, and if you stew rhubarb like tomatoes, it tastes more like prunes and applesauce. And Groucho Marx right there made a lot more sense than most of the gobbledygook we hear in California. So, oi. And then there's the DEI, right? Running around telling you how great it is. We have a fire chief who's a lesbian. And I don't think anybody cares the identity of fire chiefs and that kind of thing. We want a competent fire chief, right? If that happens to be this, that, or the other thing, we don't care. But when you tell us that the reason this person is a fire chief is because of their identity, doesn't exactly give us confidence. Okay? And then there's the thing that, there's been these complaints that there are all these white people who are applying to be firefighters. But because firefighters are all white, they want to hire more people of other races and what have you. And so there are all these people who've tried to get in as firefighters who are who applied, who can't get jobs because they don't fit the DEI characteristics. So this is, and then there's the way they let the infrastructure fail. You get these situations, and then they're going to tell us it's climate change. California's burning down because of climate change. It's not Gavin Newsom's incompetence and malfeasance. It's not this environmental wackoism. It's not the wokeness. It's not the DEI. It's climate change because, like magic, the god, it's the gods. The gods did it. Climate change is their god now. It's their religion. It's Marxist religion. And so it's never us. It's always them, right? Anyway, Donald Trump has called this out several times over the years. That's out there. And now he has called for Gavin Newsom to resign. Hell, Gavin Newsom shouldn't even have been governor in the first place. Yes, absolutely. He should resign. He should go to ground, and he should never show his face in public ever again. The guy should take full and complete responsibility for the utter failure in California, and many other people at various levels of state and local government should also resign, and let's try getting some new people in. Competent people who know how to do things. Oy. All right. On that lovely note, I'm going to switch gears after the break here and come back and talk about Israeli news. Visit the Inside Israel News store on Etsy to get your swag and support the show at the same time. You can get the Promised Land shirt or the Now You're Messing with the Son of a Mensch shirt or other interesting swag, phone cases, and such at the store. Go to Etsy, look up Inside Israel News, or you can go to the website, insideisrael.news, and click on the image of the store, of the items for sale. Get your swag and show your support for Israel today. It's still a terribly emotional subject. We have so many, Agamberger, we have Naama Levy, we haven't seen Ariel and Kfir Bibas, two little boys, right? Kfir was a baby when he was taken hostage. We don't even know if any of these people are still alive. And it's horrifying. There's 100 people still unaccounted for. For the families who don't know if their loved ones, brothers, sisters, children, they don't know if those people are still alive. And if they are alive, what condition they're in. As I mentioned, hostages like Aden Yerushalmi, who was killed by Hamas before she could be rescued, was skeletal, like she'd been starved. And this kind of thing, horrible. We have a number of estimates out there from intelligence agencies and such that are guessing that there are probably about 20 hostages still alive. And I hate to be a pessimist, but it's hard to be optimistic about things like that. So I'm inclined to believe the bad news. I'd love to see more than that come out, but I don't know. I don't think so. In the meantime, President Trump has given Hamas the deadline that he's told them that he's going to rain hell on them. It's going to be really bad for them if they don't release the hostages. And that's how you get hostages released. Israeli negotiators have been meeting with Hamas representatives in talks about this issue. And Hamas is slowly being willing to make concessions they haven't made before. And while they're not quite ready to surrender, things are headed in that general direction. And that's a good thing. Really, what should happen here is Hamas should surrender. They should disarm. They should turn over their leadership and the criminals and disband and give us the hostages back. That would be justice, right? But that's not going to happen. That said, most of the old leadership has been whacked at this point. A lot of the younger mid-level leadership has been destroyed, and Hamas is having to torture Palestinians and shoot them in the legs to maintain power. Like they're literally torturing people in public, as I've talked about before. It's horrifying. Hamas is a cancer to Jews and Arabs alike, and it needs to be cured, right? So this is where things stand, and it's heartbreaking because you have families torn apart, you have people worried for their children. Will we see any of these people ever again? And the videos we have from them of these hostages when they were taken, a lot of them were in a bad way, right? I mean, I'm still haunted by the images of Naama Levy being dragged out from that vehicle, blood all over her pants, spewing from, these are things that just should never happen in a modern civilized world. They should never happen in general, but they especially should not happen in a modern civilized world. Okay? Women should be safe wherever they are, and the people who make them unsafe are criminals and deserve to be punished. It is inexcusable. There's no such thing as, oh, it's just resistance. We don't get to choose the way in which they resist. Well, okay, so now on every college campus, young men can just decide that they're oppressed and then rape's back on the table, right? It's okay, get a girl drunk at a party and have fun, right? I'm sorry, my friends. I can't even be sarcastic about this. It's sickening and it sticks in my throat. When I hear about these kinds of things, just, ooh. Men who abuse women, I'd like to break their jaws and, abuse them a little bit. And that's what they rightly deserve. Somebody recently asked online, could we execute the perpetrators of October 7th? Right? Should Israel bring back the death penalty? And I said, is it possible to execute them twice? Can we bring back drawing and quartering? Right? In the Tudor era in England, if you committed treason, you would be hanged until half dead. Your privy parts removed. You're still alive at this point, right? Then your gut would be opened. Your intestines would be drawn onto a wheel. And then you'd be tied to 4 horses, and then they slap the horses, and off you go in different directions. Not a very fun way to die, but let me tell you, no one wanted to commit treason and get caught in England in the 16th century, okay? By the way, this was a public execution, so anyone could go and get an anatomy lesson by watching, right? So, everyone knew what the price of treason was. If you rebelled against Good Queen Bess, this is what was going to happen to you, right? That was a clear message. So, anyway, so I half jokingly, can we execute them twice? Drawing and quartering, the rack, garroting. Just some thoughts, right? You'll find that I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who rape and torture and murder children and take hostages of children. These are people that, anyway, they have forfeited their lives. They have forfeited any human rights. Chop them up and feed them to the dogs, my friends. It's where they rightly belong. Now, that all said, all that emotion and all that anger out there, let's be rational, let's be just, right? The Torah teaches us we cannot pervert justice to the poor or to the rich. So we cannot deny justice to the extent that people have protections under law, even to terrorists. But we cannot back down from justice. These people need to be punished and need to suffer for what they did so that others will be deterred, so others will know better. More importantly, they need to be destroyed. Anyway, end of rant, but holy mackerel. Do those hostages need to come home now, and Hamas needs to surrender? They only have a few days left, right? Donald Trump will be in on, as I'm recording this, it's 11 days. So, better hurry up. Donald's coming. I wouldn't want to be there when, Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu, I clarify his full name. In Israel, everyone has a nickname. Like especially if you have a biblical name, nobody goes by, nobody is Reuven, you're Ruby, right? Ivrid is a nickname. And so every time I would talk to people about a figure, and historically, in Israel, and they're like, oh, yes, Yossi, da, 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 da. And it's always something like that. It's not, something, Eitan, it's always a nickname. Anyway, nobody uses their actual full name. Anyway, Bibi Netanyahu recently had his prostate surgery on a cancerous growth there. He recovered and seems to be in good health. And this has led to the postponement of his court appearance in his trial. So they've had to delay a hearing in order to accommodate that operation. So the trials are still on. Even as, Israelis have elected him again and again to be prime minister. And that it just, anyway, it's still an issue. Lawfare is not unique to the United States, right? All right. There's a bit of really good news in economic news in Israel. I love talking about the economic news, and I never get around to it, especially with all this stuff going on. The Israeli government has signed a deal with Elbit Systems, and Elbit Systems is an Israeli company that does military manufacturing. The deal is that they're going to produce aircraft munitions and ammunition in Israel, right? And I'm just, thank God. As we have seen from the Biden administration, Israel cannot afford to rely on foreign partners to produce its ammunition, like the Iron Dome missiles. They're made in the U.S., right? And that's good that we have that technology. The U.S. uses the same systems to protect our troops overseas, right? But if they're made here, they can be withheld, right? If they're made in Israel, part of this deal, though, what's really cool about it is Israel is going to build a raw materials processing plant so that Israel can bring in raw minerals, metals, and what have you, and process them into useful, for military uses, semi-finished goods, like turning steel into steel sheets or something like that, right? Something you can use to do something, various sheet metals and what have you. So that's really big. Israel has wanted for some time to be more self-reliant, and they're in an economic position now where they can start doing that. Israel can produce its own gas offshore. It can now, they'll be able to manufacture some of their own weapons. The Israelis would like to be fully self-sufficient. So people always talking about, America sending, billions of dollars, $3.5 billion, $4 billion of military aid to Israel, right? Most of that money is spent here in the U.S. Israel buying weapons from the U.S. that it can then go and use, and that's very good for the U.S. because we get to manufacture more stuff that we wouldn't manufacture otherwise. Yes, it goes to a foreign government, but we get so much more. Don't believe me? Ask Ted Cruz on the Verdict podcast. He's been talking about how great it is having Israel as an ally, the economic partnership and the military partnership. And that the U.S. could never create an intelligence agency as efficient as Mossad that can share information with the U.S. So that little bit of foreign aid brings a lot of benefit for the United States, huge benefit, worth so much more. We could give Israel 100 times that every year, and we'd still benefit. I exaggerate, but to make my point. All right, sometimes hyperbole. But anyway, really great news. Israel is slowly working on becoming more self-sufficient in ammunition and munitions and weapons. It's great to have F-35 fighters, but if you have no missiles to put on them, and that sort of thing. Okay. The new Syrian government is led by this guy, al-Jolani, right? Jolani means it's the Arabic cognate of Golan, right? So basically Hagolani in Hebrew, the person of the Golan Heights is his name. And that's a reference to, occupied territory, as he calls it. But he's slowly putting together a new government in Syria. And while it is clearly Islamist and he's clearly a terrorist, it's been interesting to watch. I mean, at this point, Syria can't do much worse. They had a dictator in Bashar al-Assad who was gassing his own people to death and murdering his people by the hundreds of thousands and using Iranian and Iranian-backed Hezbollah and Russia to bomb and mass murder his citizens, you can't get much worse than that. So it's with a certain amount of, I don't support any of this stuff, but it's with a certain amount of ennui, let's see what happens, right? But apparently he's been able to work with the country's minorities thus far. The Kurds, the SDF, Kurdish group is working with him now. The Druze, most of the Druze live from the Golan, kind of in a crescent south of Damascus, right there. And they're ready to join the new national army that's being formed. So maybe Syria will come back together as something a little better than the chaos that it's had. It's interesting. The PBS did this great documentary on Jelani. They went and interviewed him, and it's a good documentary, worth the watch. Go look it up if you want to watch it. And he presented himself very well to the reporters, right? But they still had the tough credit. I mean, this is a guy who started off fighting for Al-Qaeda against the U.S. in Iraq as a terrorist, right? And he says, oh, well, I didn't support the suicide bombing. Sure you didn't, right? I'm a moderate terrorist. I'm a nice terrorist. I only kill people on Monday and alternating Tuesdays, right? I only murder children once a month, right? So it was really interesting to watch. And of course, he was associated and affiliated with Islamic State for a time. And the real reason he kind of moved away from Al-Qaeda was so that he could get foreign backing for his group, for HTS. But his thing with Islamic State, the reason he moved away from that was that he wanted to be in charge, right? That was more of a political thing. It wasn't that he had any disagreements with Islamic State. He just didn't want to be under al-Baghdadi. So when Baghdadi was whacked by the U.S., he was happier than a lamb because it's like now he can be the big guy himself, right? So it's really interesting. But like I said, Syria's in a bad way, and it's hard to be worse than the last guy. So it's a very low bar. I do hope that the people of Syria will get a better deal out of all of this. And he's talking about the refugees going back. Yeah, they should. They don't really belong in Europe. The crime rates, the rate of crimes against women and all this kind of stuff in Europe have just skyrocketed. So I don't know. I'm going to watch with, interested objectivity, given the little sliver of a benefit of the doubt, and just wait and see what happens. Because like I said, it's a low bar. But this isn't a guy we like. This isn't a good guy. It isn't going to be a good government from that point of view. But anything, it'd be better than nothing. And we'll see. Maybe if the Syrian government comes together and is somewhat pluralistic and democratic, the country might head in a different direction that isn't Islamist. But so far, they're doing a lot of the Taliban stuff. Women have to wear the headscarves, and they're attacking people for smoking. I mean, it's just there's all kinds of stuff. So anyway, not necessarily a good thing. We'll see what happens. Overall, as I talked about in the last couple of episodes, Israel has kicked Tukus. Israel has driven Iran back to Iraq. They have driven Iran back to the Houthis. And now Iran is going to have to fight in their own front yard, much more so. I've been talking about how, Israel and its new Arab allies and the Saudis, who are probably going to normalize sometime soon, they certainly weren't going to do so to give Joe Biden any credit. But with Donald Trump returning to office, they respect him, and they'll listen, and we'll see what might happen. And even if not normalization, there can be greater military cooperation and communication between the two governments without formal relations, let's just say. In any case, the Israel and the Arabs need to get together and work together to get something going in Iraq to bog the Iranians down there and maybe push in the general direction of liberating Iraq from Iran's influence. And of course, Israel is also going to help work on the Houthi issue. The Houthis shooting into the Red Sea and trying to block the Bab el-Mandab Strait down there. Israel's going to have a base in Somaliland, possibly, in exchange for their recognition by the U.S. That would allow Israeli ships to be closer, Israeli corvettes, right, not frigates, to be closer to the action. So Israel is a power in the region, for sure, together with the Arabs, there is no limit. Israel can do a lot of things, and we'll see what happens. So, quick break, and I'll come back with the international section. A lot of interesting stuff about European politics. Is the left collapsing? All sorts of fun stuff. And World War III by proxy. An update. So the big question right now is 2025 going to be the year of the collapse of the left, right? The year the left collapses. That's an interesting question. Prime Minister Trudeau is down already. Obviously, Donald Trump has won in the U.S. Keir Starmer is in a big mess in the U.K., which I'm about to talk about and speak to here in just a minute. The left is in deep trouble throughout the Western culture, throughout the Western civilization. And that begs the question, is this the end? Will the left basically collapse hereafter? Well, who knows? I mean, the dangers and the destructive realities of wokeness and multiculturalism and all of this nonsense in Europe are, the chickens are coming home to roost. And we're starting to see the horrors that have been brought on by these attitudes and policies. So I'm going to touch on them all briefly, but is this the end? One can hope so. It would also be nice if the left in these countries, respectively, would get its act together and start being about the things that it should have been about all along, sticking up for the little guy, protecting people, instead of ignoring terrible harm. Which brings me to my first story. We've known for a long time, there were various incidents that were uncovered in Rotherham in recent years and so on and so forth. So many problems in the UK that it's hard to talk about this because, when you have to forgive me, my friends. I am myself a victim of childhood rape, and to see these stories about how the British government looked the other way while Pakistani men raped and abused white British girls is horrible. The racial component of it really isn't relevant. The point is, Britain has these groups of people who are behaving this way, and the British government deliberately looked the other way. Keir Starmer, as the chief prosecutor at the time, when this was, back in the aughts, when Gordon the leper, was prime minister, gave orders to the police not to investigate these crimes, right? At least that's he was there at that time. The stand down was given. It's presumably him. There should be an investigation, and if it comes back to him, Keir Starmer should be skewered politically. Not calling for violence. He should be skewered politically, and he should be finished. Boris Johnson was tossed out of office unceremoniously over a scandal about having pizza parties during the COVID lockdowns, and Keir Starmer was looking the other way and allowing children to be sexually abused in Britain because of political correctness. There's no words. At this point, I think I've said what I have to say. I'm glad Elon Musk is championing this issue. We're getting this attention out there. Thanks to X, we can actually say these things. Some of the victims who have come forward and tried to be public about this issue, they are being silenced. Like the British government has sent them warnings over their posts on X, telling them to stop posting. Because in Britain, you can be arrested for posting on social media, right? It's horrendous. Elon Musk has called for the king to use his royal prerogative to dissolve parliament and call an election. Knowing Charles's politics, Charles III is unlikely to do that. Of course, he only got that power back after the Fixed-Term Parliament Act of 2011 was repealed in 2021, restoring the king's prerogative. But for a time, only Parliament could vote to dissolve itself, right? But now the king can royal prerogative is back. The king could do that. And people are talking about, he's trying to overthrow the British government. Dissolving parliament would call on new elections, right? That's not overthrowing a government. That's handing things over to the voters. If the voters would toss out Labour at this point, then that's all the more reason that there should be an election, right? If the government's unpopular. So I'm looking forward to seeing Keir Starmer go. I'm looking forward to British voters having a choice again soon. And perhaps we'll see a coalition of conservatives and reform, right? As I analyzed in the last election, more people voted right than left in Britain. But because it was divided between reform and the Tories, the conservatives, it just didn't work out very well. Anyway, they should have that election. Those two should figure out how to get along. And Keir Starmer needs to go. That is absolutely ridiculous. Let's talk about something a little more lighthearted, because I'm going to end up punching out Keir Starmer metaphorically and figuratively, and not in reality, because I'm not a violent person. If ever someone deserved it, though, and I'm sure that the victims would celebrate if someone would, if someone would just rid me of this meddlesome prime minister. Anyway, it's a joke and a history reference. Let's not go there. But anyway, there's that. Good friend of mine, Stephen, you know who you are, liked my joke about the German political colors and talking about the various coalitions. And he was noting, because we were trying to figure out what to call one particular type of coalition, but he was noting that if you add the blue, right, you've got the possibility of the Conservative Party, the CDU, Christian Democrats are represented by black, and you have the SPD, the Socialists, they're represented by red, the Free Democrats by yellow. And if you added blue to that, he was saying, this would be the Coral Snake Coalition, right? I just thought that is great, how we have something that has these colors. It's a coral snake, right? Also, there is, the baboon. There's various baboons that have this color. And so we had to have a good laugh at the prospect of having a baboon coalition in Germany, a baboon-colored coalition in Germany, because there's, baboons and politicians. It's such a great metaphor. It's too bad it's not original, but, I'm sure Samuel Clemens, that's Mark Twain, to those of you in Riolinda, made references several times to politicians as baboons. But still, it's still there. Okay. So German politics, Germany is going to a new election soon. The Alternative for Deutschland is gaining, or AfD, or Alternative, depending on whom you ask, has been gaining in the polls. And it's like, we need to talk about this. And I know Elon Musk is like, only AfD can save Germany. Maybe not. This is the danger of commenting on politics. You'll notice when I comment on foreign politics that there's a certain caution. I reserve a little bit of judgment. I don't go all in, even with Israeli politics, though there are parties and agendas that I support. I tell you, about that stuff. But Elon going out there and championing, calling out and vote for AfD. I mean, this kind of thing. You really should know who you're talking about, right? So Deutsche Welle put out that's a German news service, the main there, put out a great documentary in which they didn't interview any German politicians who have a skin in the game. They went and interviewed foreign experts from Poland, France, Britain, U.S., professors and intellectuals. They analyzed the party platform, and they interviewed the leaders of AfD itself. And you can go watch that. I shared it on Facebook and on X, or you can go hunt it down yourself. The Deutsche Welle documentary, it's on YouTube, about AfD. And they talked about how basically AfD's platform is a Russian and Chinese wet dream. Like, they don't want to defend Taiwan. They don't want to defend Ukraine. They want Germany to remilitarize. They're kind of iffy on NATO. They keep talking about, well, we should stay in NATO, but it's not really clear how committed they are to the alliance. And they want to move Germany away from the U.S., right? They have that Russian narrative that the U.S. is responsible for all the problems in the world, right? Now, I've talked about before how it frustrates me here in the U.S. to hear people basically on the woke right, right? We have wokeness right and left in America. And the woke right is more marginal. But, people who are just emotionally tied to Russian propaganda and Russian narratives. And they're so easily broken down. They get angry with me very quickly because, and I'm like, why are you so emotionally tied to a tyrant, right? As an American patriot, my friends, I am emotionally tied to this country. I put on a uniform and swore to defend this country and its constitution with my life at one time. And as far as I'm concerned, that oath never goes away. I still believe in that. And I still love this country. And I am emotionally tied to its interests, right? I always put America first. But putting America first doesn't mean letting our allies get defeated. It doesn't mean letting our enemies take over large areas of the world that have vast, where the U.S. has interests, right? We've had to conquer Europe twice. We don't want to do it a third time. And as I've talked about, if we show weakness, we will have a bigger war, all right? I have sons. They want to serve in the military. My friends, I do not want any of my sons buried in Poland. I don't want any of my sons buried at sea in the Pacific. I want them to live full lives and have fun and enjoy themselves. My grandfather suffered terribly and terrifically at Okinawa to create a world in which we have the strength to prevent these kinds of wars. And if we are too stupid, too incompetent, and too cowardly to stand up for ourselves and prevent these wars, then I guess we deserve what we're going to get. But it's not these woke right people who are going to suffer. It's me, right? I'm going to have sons who are going to have to go to war if we appease dictators, because that works every time, right? Dictators are always satisfied by appeasement. So anyway, AfD, you can read about it. They've gotten rid of a bunch of their leaders who were known to be tied to Russia. But that doesn't change things. The fact is, their agenda is everything Vladimir Putin wants. It's everything Xi Jinping wants. If you want to see Germany ruled from Moscow and Beijing, vote for AfD. I, for one, know my history. And I've seen what happens when German nationalists get into power and run roughshod and come up with half-baked ideas and pursue them. A remilitarized Germany that is no longer part of the U.S. sphere, right? No longer under U.S. suzerainty, let's just say, to borrow a polite word, no longer under our control, is a very dangerous thing. It was dangerous in 1914. It was dangerous in 1941. And it would be dangerous again in 2025. So let's be sure we know who we're talking about here. Okay, so I recommend that documentary. Obviously, you can go read this stuff for yourself and their agenda and make your own decisions. On to World War III by proxy. Great interview. Oh my God. Lex Fridman has some good interviews. His interview with Javier Milei, really good. Highly recommend it. The technology he uses for translation so that it sounds, thanks to AI, it sounds like the person's own voice, but it translates into other languages. Brilliant. So he has this conversation with Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine, and they talked in several different languages, and it's translated in Zelenskyy's voice and in Friedman's voice into English so that I can listen in English. That's the language I prefer to listen to. And that's just brilliant, and it's beautiful. I enjoyed it. Great interview. It is interesting because this interview is a tale of two Jews. Right? So Lex Fridman is descended from Ukrainian Jews and lost family in the Holocaust. And Volodymyr Zelenskyy is a Ukrainian Jew who lost family in the Holocaust. Both of their families suffered under the Soviet Union. They have very similar backgrounds and yet very different lives. Lex Fridman had the advantage of being in the U.S. and growing up comfortably out of Russia's shadow and losing that awareness of Russian tyranny and imperialism, right? Whereas Zelenskyy has lived it, it's been very close to him his whole life, and now he's fighting it tooth and nail, right? But it was a great interview. Friedman brought up all the talking points. What about corruption? Zelenskyy explained that he's put a lot of people in prison. And he's come down on a lot of people over the corruption claims. Asked about elections. It's like, well, Ukrainian law says in a state of emergency, they don't hold elections. And as I've told you before, could we have held this election and really trusted the results if, say, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio were under foreign occupation, right? If Canada occupied those states, right, then could we have held a fair election? Would we have trusted the results? I don't know. Okay, but that, things work a little differently in America and we're more secure, so we don't really have to think about that kind of stuff. But still, all of the talking points. Great interview. Highly recommend it. Very long, though. But a couple of things came up that were really interesting. First of all, Ukraine now has the largest army in Europe. And by this, of course, Zelenskyy is noting that countries like Britain and France have large militaries on paper, but they're spread around the world because they have colonial possessions and they have forces that are outside of Europe. And that makes Ukraine's 980,000-man army the largest in Europe and makes Ukraine one of the most powerful countries in Europe. Well, good for them. So that is an interesting point, right? As a quick aside to that, I made the argument a while back that Ukraine needs to join NATO so that the U.S. has control over Ukraine in the future. That, they're part of an integrated European command structure where they can't just go off half-cocked and do whatever they feel like, right? I've been shot down a little bit with that argument, right? I tell you guys when I make mistakes. The way Turkey has been behaving in Syria, in Libya, taking in Hamas terrorist leaders, right? And doing all this kind of stuff, it's been showing very irresponsible behavior. Turkey should have been suspended from NATO, or at least suspension talks should have begun back when they invaded Syria for the umpteenth time while Donald Trump was in office. And if we'd threatened it then, it might have stopped there. Now, today, there's no reason that Turkey should be in NATO. And the fact that they can screw around like this shows that I was wrong. Being a part of NATO does not necessarily guarantee that countries will not go off the reservation. But the fact is, Ukraine wants to be part of Europe and the European Union. It wants to fight corruption. It wants to be a free country. And it's fighting for its life against an imperial power, right? The Russians want to invade, conquer, destroy, right? Now, if you side with the dictators, you may find yourself on the wrong side of history and might want to get educated. So there you go. It's something to think about. One of the big things that came up between them, of course, is the negotiation issue. And that's the crux of the negotiation, of the interview in this podcast about that issue. And Fridman keeps trying to bring it up, and he's slick about it. And he talks about, well, maybe we'll go down to the beach, you and Putin and Trump. And Zelenskyy says, well, one of us may drown. And Fridman says, are you a good swimmer? And Zelenskyy says, oh, yes, I'm an excellent swimmer. The implication being that Vladimir Putin would probably drown. I love that kind of banter. There was great, I can intuit enough some of the Russian that he used and some of the Ukrainian, there's slang and that kind of thing. I listened in English, but there was some good banter back and forth between them. And if you could have heard it in the original language, as I'm sure it was there were some interesting barbs thrown back and forth. But Zelenskyy was great. He did a good job representing himself and talking about these things. But, Fridman kept bringing up this thing, well, can we have realistic negotiations? And Zelenskyy is pointing out, Russia is trying to destroy Ukraine. They're ruled by a madman. You want us to negotiate with this guy? Right? Really? Seriously? And Fridman keeps saying, well, but, let's be realistic. Things are in the situation they're in. Zelenskyy gets it and Fridman doesn't. And Zelenskyy kind of educates him a little bit. Russia wants control of Ukraine and they want to destroy Ukraine. And they're not going to stop short of that. Right? Putin isn't interested in a ceasefire. If he gets a ceasefire, he gets a ceasefire so he can remilitarize, if he can get the sanctions lifted so he can rebuild his military and try again. That's what Putin wants, right? There won't be peace unless Russia goes down to total defeat. And that means arming Ukraine with the weapons they need in order to make that happen. But he kept bringing up, and Zelenskyy kept clarifying that, look, too many people have died and there's been too much pain and suffering. Parts of Ukraine are occupied. People are suffering under occupation. There's murder. There's been torture. There's been rape. Why should Ukrainians have to settle for giving that territory away to this, dictator, to this oppressive power, right? Why are we asking them to make that sacrifice? For what? To end a war? it's not going to end the war. It's just going to postpone it, right? It's like having a rain delay in a baseball game. The game's still going to go on, just later, right? So that was really good, and Zelenskyy handled that very well. So kind of ending that, Russia, in terms of casualties, is now over 800,000. And that's, killed, wounded, missing, right? 800,000 casualties. I've studied the history of the Second World War and battles like the Redraw meat grinder, right, where you had 1.2 million men die in a 3-month period in Russia defending Moscow, basically. The Germans trying to take Moscow and the Soviet Union defending it. And you think about America had 400,000 deaths, and that one battle, tiny part of a larger campaign in Russia for a few months had, 3 times the deaths, the entire American war deaths. You know what I mean? That was just one battle. I mean, the Soviet Union fought all the way through. They suffered a lot and lost a lot of people. But to see numbers like this again, to see numbers in the high hundreds of thousands, closing up on 1 million, it's terrible. And now the North Koreans, the Norks, are getting in on it. They're losing a lot of men. And the Houthis are trying to get in on it. They're losing a lot of men. It's horrible that in this time there are wars like this going on in Europe. If the United States wants to reassert itself, if we want to be strong again, if we want to have peace, right? Strength brings peace, right? And weakness begets war. If we want that again, we can have it. But the way we get that is we stop Russia. Anyway, it's been another great episode. I've tried not to get stuck anywhere too long and to kind of cover the topics like this. I'll have a few more next time. I'll have some interesting stuff to talk about. Visit the website, insideisrael.news. Find me on X, like I said, America Israel Insider News there. Also on Facebook as Inside Israel News. Would love to hear your feedback. Send me some thoughts. With that, I will say, as always, goodbye. Lehitrot.
Writers of the history, stand with me. Look into my eyes and see. People go away but never say goodbye. Someone stole the moon tonight, took my light. Everything is black and white. Who's the fool who told you boys don't cry? Hours and hours and flowers. Life is no game for the cowards. Why the time goes by? Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. Living in a fantasy, ecstasy, everything is meant to be. We shall pass, but love will never die. Hours and hours and flowers. Life is no game for the cowards. Why the time goes wild. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. טובים אחד אחד. Bring them back home now.